We have some more RFA signings to announce here today, including Ivan Provorov and Marcus Pettersson. Plus, we have some more professional tryouts confirmed. As well, could we possibly see another offer sheet involving Kyle Connor of the Winnipeg Jets? We'll get into all the latest news coming up next. So welcome back here to Top Shelf Hockey. Now we have some more breaking news and some more RFA signings, which is good news for many of these NHL teams. The dominoes continue to fall, and hopefully here over the next few days, we'll see this continue and get more of these guys under contract and into training camp as the NHL season begins to open. Now, first up, we had Marcus Pettersson and the Pittsburgh Penguins come to terms on a one-year contract, $874,000. Now, of course, there's been a lot of talk about the Penguins wanting to lock up Patterson longer term. They just don't have the cap space to be able to do that right now, and as we've discussed here over the last couple of days, was expected that he likely would end up doing a shorter term contract with the Penguins to kind of get this into the season, get him into training camp, and then you can deal with this a little bit later. Obviously, this is a pretty good contract for the Penguins. I think Pettersson played very well for them after he was acquired from the Ducks last year in that trade involving Daniel Sprong. He's been a pretty solid member of their D-core, somebody they definitely want to keep around for the long haul. I mean, his contract's not overly expensive. He's very proven to be a very valuable guy. So ultimately, I would not be surprised to see some sort of extension worked out either later into the season or possibly into next summer if need be, once the Penguins figure out a little bit more about their long-term implications for the cap. But either way, another RFA domino has fallen. Of course, where it's a defenseman, there's not too many guys left. And of course, the next guy we're going to talk about is one of the bigger name defensemen on the RFA market, and that's the Flyers defenseman Ivan Provorov, who was just announced here in the last few minutes that the Flyers and he have come to terms on a 6-year contract valued at $6.75 million per season. Now, of course, we were discussing in the last few videos as well, saying how there was rumors about Provorov working on a 6-year deal, but after Werenski with the Blue Jackets did that 3-year contract, that they possibly were looking at doing a similar type deal, but ultimately that did not work out, and they decided to stick with the plan they were already working on. So 6 years and $6.75 million. Obviously, it's a longer term contract. Based on how he played last year, certainly a little bit of risk involved, but I do think he'll work out to be an excellent player for them longer term. Based on his play the year before, he had 17 goals, played awesome on the power play, and was really proven to be their top defender most nights. And I do think he can bounce back and be a great player for them for the long haul. So obviously getting Provorov under contract is huge for the Flyers. That only leaves them with Travis Connecting to deal with. And as we discussed in the video earlier today, there apparently seems to be some philosophical differences on how to come to the agreement on what he should be paid. Both his side as well as the team side seem to be using different things to kind of argue their cases. So it does appear that they're still far apart in negotiations, so it's not quite clear how long that's going to take for them to iron out. Of course, that leaves Charlie McAvoy as the main big name RFA defenseman on the market. Between the Werenski deal and the Provorov deal, I would think that the McAvoy situation should be able to work itself out here shortly. Of course, they also have Brandon Carlo in Boston, who needs a new contract as well. It's a little bit different kind of player than the other guys here that we're talking about, so I'm not sure how those negotiations are going. We haven't really heard much about Carlo, but in McAvoy's case, personally, I would think he can get a contract something pretty similar to Provorov. He hasn't had quite the offensive production that Provorov has during his entry-level deal, so I could see him maybe getting a little bit less. Of course, he's also had some health issues, so there's a little bit of risk that way. But I could see them doing a 5 or 6 year contract with McAvoy, around 6 to 6.5 or something in that range. That makes a lot of sense to me, and we'll see if they can get that sorted out. But now that we got Zach Werenski and Ivan Provorov under contract, I would suspect the McAvoy deal won't be far behind. Now, as I mentioned, we also have some confirmation of some other veteran players going to training camps on some professional tryout agreements. We already mentioned earlier about Eric Graba going to the Calgary Flames, so he's in camp with them. We actually have Matt Molson in a training camp with the Washington Capitals. That's a little bit surprising, but either way, he's been invited to camp on a tryout, so we'll see how that goes. I'd be quite surprised if he ended up making the team. Obviously, his best years were playing with John Tavares, and after that opportunity wasn't there anymore, he really went downhill. So certainly difficult to say what his odds are, but he is in camp with the Capitals. The New York Islanders have brought back defenseman Lucas Pisa on a tryout as well. Of course, he ended up playing there a bit last year. And Christopher Steeg's gone for another round with the Chicago Blackhawks. He's also in camp with Chicago on a tryout. We know how much the Hawks love to bring back their players from their cup-winning days. They seem to make their rounds in and out here every so often. So Chris Versteeg is back in the mix here with the Hawks. Again, all of these guys, they certainly have uphill battles to climb. The odds are certainly against them, but generally every year through training camp and through the preseason, we usually do end up seeing, a couple of players end up getting deals by working really hard and proving themselves through training camp on professional tryouts. So we'll see if any of these guys can stick and get their opportunities. There's still plenty of other veteran players as well that are still looking for work out there. There's like Patrick Marleau, who's made it clear he wants to play. Dion Phaneuf is not in camp anywhere. And there's plenty others around as well that certainly are still looking for that opportunity. So we could see some more announcements. Some of these guys may be joining up at some of the training camps here throughout the week. It's difficult to say, but some of these guys might end up coming to the end of the road here as well. Now, the other big news of the day is there's been reports about Kyle Connor possibly being offer sheeted here in the coming days as we get closer and closer to training camp. Now, of course, we put it out there before talking about the possibility of offer sheets, and I know one NHL writer that we reference a lot in that regard was Adrian Dater, who's kind of referenced the fact that he felt that the offer sheet was still a possibility, but if it was going to happen, it was going to be once training camp's open, close to when the training camp would be coming to an end, when the NHL season was getting ready to start. That would make the most sense for a team to strike, because obviously at that point the team with the player receiving the offer sheet wouldn't have a ton of time throughout the offseason to be able to go over the cap. They'd have to react quickly, potentially make other moves to free up the cap space, and either decide to match or whatever. It certainly puts that team in a little bit more of a predicament and makes the offer sheet more likely to be successful. So the rumor is through Sportsnet that there's up to 3 teams that are seriously considering sending an offer sheet to Kyle Connor. That seems to be the main RFA that they feel they would have an opportunity to really successfully get to go on their team. Obviously, the Winnipeg Jets have 2 RFAs. Most other teams, there are other teams that have more than one as well. We had the Flyers, but of course now they're down to 1. The Bruins have a couple defensemen. But in regards to forwards, though, the Jets are really, the main team that are probably one of the worst predicaments here to get Patrick Laine and Kyle Connor under contract. It's been rumored that Kyle Connor wants a long-term deal, while Patrick Laine wants a shorter bridge deal, probably 2 or 3 years. There was some talk earlier about Laine, meaning more about money at this point, that they seem to be in agreement on the term. I believe they were looking at a short 2 or 3 year deal around $5 million, but obviously that's not acceptable to the player and his agent, so clearly the Jets need to come up a little higher, so we'll see how that works out. But for Kyle Connor to be offer sheeted, it could put the Winnipeg Jets in a very awkward predicament. Clearly they'd want to keep the player and match the contract, but if you take a look around the NHL, there's a ton of teams that are really in desperate need of some cap space. There's not that many teams out there anymore who would be able to do a high-valued, high-priced offer sheet and actually have the cap space and the compensation in place to be able to, to deal with that should they end up being successful in the pursuit of Kyle Connor. I mean, who could it be? Could it be Ottawa? I mean, Ottawa's got lots of cap space, but I'm not really sure that makes sense for them right now. I mean, clearly the Senators are in cost-cutting mode. They want to keep their payroll low while they, build up all these youngsters. I mean, that wouldn't make sense, but technically they do have the space. You could look to a team like the Columbus Blue Jackets now. That would make sense. Obviously, they had a mass exodus through free agency. They do have some cap space to work with. Maybe Columbus could be a team that could certainly use some more firepower after losing guys like Panarin and Duchesne and Dzingel all up front there. So, I mean, that could be a possibility as well. You could probably never rule out a team like New Jersey, even though they don't have a ton of cap space anymore. Maybe Ray Shero will be able to, quickly maneuver some other deals. I mean, depending on when the offer sheet was presented, of course, the team doing the offer sheet would have some time as well to become cap compliant if they were successful. So it's not quite clear. There was no speculation or rumors with this report indicating who the teams might be. But ultimately, it's been rumored that there's 3 teams. I believe they're all Eastern teams who are seriously considering offer sheeting Kyle Connor, the Winnipeg Jets, trying to get this player on their team. And clearly, Kyle Connor is looked upon as being one of the more complete forwards out there in the RFA market. And if you had to pick between Laine and Connor, many teams seem to prefer Connor over Laine right now because of that, because of how he plays, and he's a more complete player. And so far, has proven to be very, very productive here as well, being a 30-goal scorer already in his young career. So let me know if you think an offer sheet is going to be presented, and if so, what team would make the most sense to go after Kyle Connor in this regard. Of course, as always, I want to know your thoughts and opinions on the new contracts that were signed today for Marcus Pettersson and Ivan Provorov as well. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments and we'll continue the conversation. Of course, if you're new to the channel as well, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it as well. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.